Alarms screamed inside the palace command center. Red lights flashed everywhere. Princess Lizandra stared at the main screen in shock. A human ship was flying straight toward their planet. In the background, static crackled through the air. The communication station tried over and over to make contact with the ship. There was no answer to our hail, Captain Nixon said, typing fast on his console. Shields down, weapons offline. The human ship was small and appeared badly damaged. It shook violently as it entered the atmosphere, completely unprotected. Princess Lizandra gripped the table tightly. "Do not engage," she ordered. "Keep our weapons ready. I must tell my mother right now." The royal court was currently in session. By strict protocol, no audio communications were permitted to go through to the throne room. Princess Lizandra left the command center at once, her heartbeat hammering as her footsteps echoed down the long palace hallways. By the time she reached the heavy throne room doors, her lungs were burning. She pushed through them hard, completely out of breath. Queen Lizandra raised her right hand to silence the room. She looked at her tired daughter with calm, silver eyes. "What is wrong, my child?" the queen asked. Leandra gasped for air. "A human ship just entered our atmosphere. Their shields are down and weapons offline." The throne room fell into a heavy, tense silence. Queen Lizandra stood up from her seat, her blue gown brushing the stone floor. She looked at the High Council, then back at her breathless daughter. "My apologies, there is an urgent matter I must address." "The court is dismissed," the queen said. Court members murmured. She turned to the commander of the guards. "Send the royal guards to the palace gardens immediately," she commanded, her voice echoing through the large room. "Prepare medical teams as well. If this ship has no shields, they will hit the ground hard. And bring whoever is in that ship to my presence." Princess Lizandra nodded quickly, her heart still pounding. She turned from the throne and followed the squad of heavily armed palace guards through the lower levels of the castle. Their armor clanked against the walls while her breath struggled to steady. Outside, the bright midday sky of Alaris was changing. A trail of dark smoke cut through the clouds. The human ship was falling fast, aiming straight for the beautiful, green royal gardens. To the surprise of the princess, the guards, and the medical team, the ship landed softly on the grass. The ramp opened with a sharp hiss. A short human with a dirty face descended from the ship. The guards instantly pointed their weapons at him simultaneously. Princess Lizandra looked at the human with amusement, then looked toward the guards and commanded, "Detain him." Queen Lizandra governed the great empire of Kiros, located deep within the Brendalic star system. She was a striking ruler, possessing a sharp and timeless beauty that humans would compare to a well-preserved 55-year-old. Lizandra had worn the crown for exactly 25 years, taking power right after a violent attack took the life of her own mother. That dark history had forged her into a brilliant, highly intelligent leader with a quick wit, and absolutely zero patience for foolishness or ignorance. It was the exact reason she kept her royal court under such strict control. No one dared step out of line under her watchful gaze. Yet beneath her cold, ruling exterior lay a deeply protective mother. She had only one child, Princess Lizandra, who was her ultimate pride and joy. Through the open court doors, the royal guards entered. Princess Lizandra tagged along at a safe distance behind them. Escorted between the heavy armor of the guards, a single human marched forward. The queen turned around, her silver eyes narrowing instantly at the sight of the human. The guards stopped exactly 5 steps from the queen. The queen stood temporarily frozen in shock. The human looked up at her. "Shouldn't you be sitting up there?" With a sarcastic smile, he said quietly. Hearing the disrespect, one of the guards raised his weapon to strike the prisoner. "Stop!" the queen yelled, her voice cutting through the room like ice. The queen looked closely at the human and murmured through her teeth, "I was going to. You don't have to tell me. I'm the queen here." With her eyes still locked on him, the queen proceeded to sit back down on her high throne. The guards stepped back, moving to their respective defensive positions. The human smiled warmly at her. "Hello, Liz. Long time no see." Queen Lizandra broke into a happy, genuine smile. "Hello, Michael," she replied. At the back of the room, Princess Lizandra looked completely confused. She watched the strange, messy human and asked herself a single question. Who is this human? The queen quickly composed herself, and a mask of cold seriousness returned to her face. You humans think that space is yours to do whatever you please, she stated firmly. Michael tried to interrupt, but the queen cut him off with a sharp look. I am still speaking. What is your business in Kiros? Did I not tell you that if I ever saw you again, I would kill you? Michael simply smiled. You said if I made you mad, you would do it. Besides, I missed you too. The tense air shattered, and they both laughed like children, leaving the surrounding guards bewildered. Then the laughter faded. Michael looked up at her, the humor completely gone from his eyes. Seriously, Liz, we need to talk. Queen Lizandra descended from the throne, her expression calm but unreadable. Come, follow me. Princess, you too. Leandra glanced between her mother and Michael, more confused than ever, but she obeyed. The queen led them through a side passage into her private chamber, moving with a speed that made her blue gown whisper across the floor. Once the doors sealed behind them, Lizandra activated the privacy shield. A faint shimmer spread across the walls, cutting them off from the palace outside. Whatever Michael had come to say, the queen clearly did not want anyone listening. Michael took a step forward, his voice dropping to a low, intense whisper that echoed in the quiet room. It's about the attack, he said. 25 years ago. Queen Lizandra's expression sharpened. Michael kept his eyes on her. 3 days ago, the Tharax contacted me from their hidden colony. They gave me partial data recovered from the tactical and telemetry box found in the wreckage, he continued. Data showing the former Queen's flagship had its shields remotely shut down and its course changed to the ambush site. Leandra's breath caught. Michael's voice turned colder. It was done deliberately, remotely. He looked from Lizandra to Leandra, letting the truth settle before he spoke again. Your mother and Leandra's father did not die the way the council told you they did. Queen Lizandra's smile vanished instantly. Her skin went pale, and her silver eyes fixed on Michael with a mixture of shock and sudden fury. Princess Leandra watched, her jaw dropping. The attack that killed her grandmother and father was the most painful piece of history in the Empire, and this dirty human pilot somehow held its darkest secrets. They told me they were killed by the Tharax faction, Queen Lizandra said, her voice shaking but furious. The High Council said the outer colonists rebelled because of unfair treatment on their colonies. They blamed the Tharax for the attack. Michael shook his head slowly, looking at Queen Lizandra with deep pity. The Tharax were angry, Liz. That part of the story was true. They hated the Council's taxes, but they did not attack your mother's ship. The Council used their anger to make them look guilty. He stepped closer, his gaze shifting to Princess Leandra before returning to the Queen. The Tharax didn't destroy that flagship. They were trying to protect it when it was under attack. In their effort, they lost good people. The Queen suddenly felt dizzy, and Princess Leandra screamed, Mother! Queen Lizandra raised one trembling hand. I'm okay, she said, her voice weak. Help me sit down. She lowered her head, the weight of the truth crushing her. By the stars, what have I done? I ordered the bombardment of their colonies. Her voice broke as tears filled her eyes. I killed them. I killed them all. Michael knelt in front of her chair, his voice gentle but firm. Liz, listen. Earth moved many Tharax before things got worse. When the news about your mother and husband broke, you were angry and would not listen to anyone. I made an urgent request to Earth, and they moved as many Tharax as they could. Queen Lizandra looked up at Michael, tears shining in her silver eyes. The crushing weight of her guilt lifted just a little bit. Thank you, my dear friend, she whispered softly. Princess Leandra stood by her mother, looking back and forth between the two of them. She realized that this human had saved thousands of lives from her own family's tragic mistake. Michael stood back up and fixed his gaze at both royals. But they can't stay hidden forever, Liz, and the people who actually killed your family are still out there waiting. Michael's gaze drifted to the royal seal carved into the private chamber door, and his expression tightened as if an old suspicion had finally found its shape. There was a cook, Michael said slowly, his voice lowering. The council ordered his execution for espionage after the attack. He swore he was innocent, and he kept saying the enemy was within the walls of the palace. Queen Lizandra froze, looking up at her daughter as the pieces of a puzzle began to take shape. The cook had been telling the truth. The real traitors were somewhere within the palace. A loud, heavy knocking shattered the silence of the private chamber. Outside the door, Captain Nixon's voice called out, asking permission to enter. Without waiting for the privacy shield to completely drop, the doors slid open. Captain Nixon stepped inside, looking tense and deeply uncomfortable. "I am sorry, Your Majesty," Nixon said, avoiding eye contact with the Queen, "but we were ordered to detain the human." Queen Lizandra stood up instantly, her silver eyes blazing with fury. "By whose authority?" she demanded. The captain straightened his posture, swallowing hard. "The High Council, Your Majesty." "Captain," Queen Lizandra commanded, her voice ice cold. "Under no circumstances will you relinquish custody of this man." Captain Nixon looked caught between the ultimate power of the throne and the political weight of the lawmakers. He dropped his head slightly in a reluctant nod. Michael raised one finger into the air, looking perfectly relaxed despite the armed guards filling the doorway. "Am I under arrest?" Queen Lizandra broke her serious expression, a small smile returning to her face. "No, we are going to pretend." "Okay," Michael said with a shrug, leaning back comfortably against a velvet chair. "So, I'll pretend to sit right here." Princess Leandra laughed softly at his calm attitude. "He is cute," she whispered under her breath. The Queen blushed slightly at her daughter's comment, clearing her throat to regain her royal composure. She turned toward the secret exit at the back of the room. "Come with me, Princess," she said, her tone turning serious again. The High Council chambers were a true work of art. The massive room spanned 3 towering tiers. The first tier featured 12 majestic chairs arranged in a perfect semicircle. The upper 2 tiers were reserved strictly for observers, though they sat empty during this private emergency session. Lord Akison sat at the center in the senior seat. To his right sat Lady Bella, and to his left sat Lord Thalora. The Queen and the Princess walked into the room with absolute grace. As they approached the center floor, Lord Akison spoke up. "Ah, Your Majesty, we were just about to inform you of the charges against Michael. Did we not banish him from the Empire? We threatened him with execution if he ever returned." The Queen looked incredibly angry, her posture stiffening. Before the argument could escalate, Lady Bella looked past Akison toward the Queen, her tone surprisingly light. "How is Michael? Is he okay? I like Michael. He's very cute." "I know, right?" the princess replied instantly, smiling. Once again, the Queen blushed, quickly clearing her throat to regain control of the room. "Yes, he is okay, and right now he is under arrest, pending investigation. Also, he has formally asked for asylum. Apparently, someone wants him dead." Lord Akison gave a grim smile, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Very well, Your Majesty." The Queen and the Princess left the Grand Council chambers, their long gowns sweeping along the stone floors as they hurried back to the private quarters. When they stepped back inside the room, they found Michael still resting comfortably in the velvet chair under Captain Nixon's watchful eye. The Queen approached him, her serious face softening slightly. "We spoke to the council," she said. Then she remembered the conversation with Lady Bella and added, "Lady Bella says hi." Michael suddenly flinched, a visible shudder running through his shoulders. His eyes widened in genuine terror. "No, no," he mumbled, rubbing his arms. "She gives me the heebie-jeebies." Princess Leandra giggled at his reaction, while the Queen raised an eyebrow, highly amused by the tough human pilot's sudden fear of Lady Bella. "And by the way," the Queen continued, crossing her arms as she looked down at him, "you requested asylum." Michael blinked in shock, jumping slightly in his chair. "What the heck, Liz?" he gasped. "Asylum?" The Queen narrowed her eyes, her voice dropping to a dry, no-nonsense whisper. "It is either that or execution, death, hanging. Take your pick." Michael stared at her for a second, processing the heavy threat of the High Council. He slowly raised his hands in defeat, leaning back into his chair with a sigh. Okay, I get it." The Queen turned away from Michael and faced her guard captain. "Captain Nixon, arrange quarters in the royal wing for the commander. Might as well address you by your proper rank," she noted, turning her sharp eyes back onto the pilot. She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "And how do humans say it? For the love of God, Michael, behave. Don't break things. Don't go testing the council. And stay away from Lord Akison. He really hates you, Michael. Michael immediately stood up straight, snapped his boots together, and brought his hand to his brow in a firm, crisp human military salute. Yes, ma'am, he said with a smirk. As the queen and the princess turned to leave the room, Lizandra leaned close to her daughter's ear. In a very low whisper, she murmured, You are right, he is cute, but he is also a menace. Leandra pressed her hand over her mouth, trying not to laugh, but the queen's smile broke first. A moment later, they both left the room laughing softly. The royal wing of the palace was quiet and beautiful, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the command center. Heavy tapestries lined the stone walls, and glowing crystalline lights illuminated the hallways. Captain Nixon led Michael to his assigned quarters, maintaining the appearance of a strict military escort. Once inside, Michael looked around the luxurious room. There was a massive bed with silk sheets, alien artwork on the walls, and a large balcony overlooking the glowing city of Alaris. The Queen expects you to remain inside, Commander, Captain Nixon said, adjusting his armor. My guards will be stationed right outside your door, for your safety and ours. Michael tossed his dirt-stained flight jacket onto a pristine velvet chair. Relax, Captain. I promised Liz I'd behave. I'm just going to get some rest. Nixon gave a stiff nod and stepped out, the heavy metal doors sliding shut with a secure click. The moment the doors locked, Michael's relaxed expression disappeared. He walked over to the balcony doors, pulled the heavy curtain shut, and reached into his boot. He pulled out a compact encrypted data slate containing the partial Tharax recovery files secretly delivered to him before he came to Kiros. Meanwhile, inside the Queen's private living quarters, Queen Lizandra and Princess Leandra sat together, engaged in a quiet conversation. The air was soft, lit by the warm glow of fireplace crystals. Leandra looked up, the question she had been holding back all day finally breaking through. How do you know Michael, Mother? Lizandra looked into the fire, a faint melancholic smile touching her lips. He was your father's best friend. They went to the Galactic Academy together. After they graduated, one day your father brought him to the palace. My mother liked him right away. Lizandra chuckled softly, shaking her head. But he is never serious. At the beginning, I absolutely hated him. He was annoyed, sarcastic, always cracking jokes. She looked at Leandra, her eyes softening with deep emotion. And then, your father pulled me to the side. He said to me, That man has nobody. His wife and his young daughter, she wasn't even a year old yet, were killed. The way he acts, the sarcasm, it is the only way he knows how to cope with the loss. Leandra stayed completely quiet, her heart aching for the human pilot locked in the royal wing. I was about to have you, the Queen continued, her voice dropping to a gentle whisper. That very night you came into the world. Later that night, once the healers were gone and I was finally resting, Michael came quietly to see you. He looked down at you, smiled and said, Leandra, after your mother. I didn't say anything to him then. Lizandra wiped a stray tear from her cheek. Later that night, I went for a walk while you were sleeping. I found him alone on one of the balconies. He was talking into the dark night, speaking to his lost family. He was crying. He was saying, Please, guys, watch over the little Princess Leandra. From that exact moment, I knew that Leandra would be your name. We became good friends after that, Lizandra said warmly. I bailed him out of so much trouble. I really wanted to kill him sometimes. But when your grandmother and your father died in the attack, he stayed. I almost lost my mind back then. You were only about 3 years old. Queen Lizandra's smile faded, replaced by the ghost of her old guilt. Before I ordered the bombardment of the Tharax colonies, Michael tried to stop me. Every time I was about to mess up, he would get right between me and my own orders, trying to protect me from making a mistake. So, I banned him. I cast him out of the Empire to keep him away from the Council and away from my anger. The Queen looked down at her hands, the pain of the past heavy in her voice. That was the second worst decision of my life. When he left, I would not even say goodbye to him. I was so full of anger. The only true friend I had left, other than your father, and I pushed him away. Leandra reached out, gently placing her hand over her mother's. Did anyone try to stop you? Lady Bella did, Lizandra admitted, looking up with a faint sigh. She tried to change my mind. She pleaded with me not to banish him, but I was too blind to listen to her back then. Princess Lizandra sat back, processing everything. The queen looked toward the window, watching the distant city lights of Alaris twinkle in the night. She shook her head, a familiar sense of dread mixed with amusement settling over her. "Oh, child," Lizandra sighed, a small smile returning to her face despite the seriousness of the night. "Before this day is over, he is going to get into trouble, or trouble will find him." Leandra looked toward the royal wing, wondering exactly what the human commander was doing at that very moment. "You really think he can't stay out of trouble for even one night?" "It is his superpower," the queen replied dryly. "And right now, with the council watching his every move, the shadows in this palace are getting restless." Back in the royal wing, a soft knock echoed at the door of the commander's quarters. Michael opened it to find Lady Bella standing in the entryway, smiling playfully. "May I come in?" she asked. "No," Michael said immediately, blocking the doorway. "I'm about to go to bed." "Alone?" Lady Bella purred, stepping closer. "We have to fix that. I brought drinks." Panicking, Michael screamed for the guards. Captain Nixon instantly rushed into the room and cleared his throat loudly. "I am sorry, Lady Bella. No visitors are allowed." Lady Bella stopped, crossing her arms. She locked her eyes onto Michael and gave him a deadly, narrow-eyed glare before turning on her heel and sweeping down the hallway. Michael shuddered, locking the door behind her. The next morning, warm sunlight filled the palace dining hall as Queen Lizandra, Princess Lizandra, and Michael sat down for breakfast. The table was covered with exotic fruits, delicate pastries, and crystal pitchers of rich juice. The moment Michael sat down, Queen Lizandra and Princess Lizandra looked at him with wide, knowing smiles. Michael blinked, holding a piece of bread halfway to his mouth. "What?" he asked, looking suspicious. The queen leaned forward, her silver eyes dancing with amusement. "We heard that you and Lady Bella had a little thing last night." Michael's face turned bright red. He looked completely embarrassed, lifting both hands as he shook his head. "Oh, no, no, no," he stammered. "Nothing happened. Absolutely nothing." Princess Leandra turned to her mother, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye. "You are right, mother," she gasped out, shaking her head. "He really can't stay out of trouble." "I told you, child," the queen replied, her silver eyes gleaming with absolute victory. "The man is a magnet for chaos." "Hey, I am the victim here," Michael protested, pointing a finger at them dramatically. "She smuggled moon wine and had a look in her eye that promised galactic war. I did exactly what any highly trained commander would do. I hid behind your giant guards." The queen and the princess laughed so loudly it could be heard all the way down the hallways, completely shattering the usual stuffy silence of the royal wing. The laughter in the dining room faded away as the heavy reality of their situation returned, his playful look completely disappearing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a compact data slate loaded with the partial Tharax recovery file, placing it gently on the table between the queen and the princess. "The humor is over, Liz," Michael said softly. "We need to talk about what the Tharax colony found. And about that cook, the one executed 25 years ago for espionage." Queen Lizandra leaned forward, her silver eyes locking onto the device. "This is what the Tharax gave you?" Michael nodded. He swiped his finger across the hologram. Broken tactical records, telemetry fragments, damaged security logs, and traces of palace clearance codes flickered above the table. "The former Queen's flagship was not on a military mission," Michael said. "Commander Jaran told me she was traveling to meet the Tharax government for negotiations. Someone inside the palace created the opportunity for the attack. Then the council blamed the Tharax colonies before anyone could question it." Queen Lysandra's face hardened. "And the cook?" Michael said. "Last night I contacted Commander Jaran, and he had solid information about the cook. Jaran told me the cook learned about the planned ambush before it happened. He contacted the Tharax government and warned them the flagship would be attacked, but he only knew enough to say the Tharax would be blamed for the assault. That warning is why he was arrested and later executed. The Tharax dispatched ships to the ambush site from the information he provided, but they arrived too late. Unknown ships were already attacking the flagship. The Tharax tried to help, and they lost every ship they sent." Queen Lizandra looked at Michael, then at Leandra. Princess Lizandra will go with you to the old execution archive. That way we can pretend you are still under arrest while you look for the old execution logs. Take Captain Nixon, too. She stepped closer and gave Michael a hard look. And Michael, she is my baby. No trouble. No heroics. Michael smiled warmly, snapping into a relaxed posture. Liz, shh. I got this. Princess Lizandra looked at her mother with curiosity. And what are you going to do, mother? I'm going to see Lady Bella, the queen replied firmly. Princess Lizandra broke out into a massive smirk. Are you going to set boundaries and claim? The queen's face turned bright red. She answered, No, yes. Michael looked genuinely confused, pulling a face. Wait, claim? Lizandra waved one hand quickly, still smiling. Never mind. Palace politics. You would not survive the explanation. Michael pointed at Lizandra. Come on, you cannot say something like that and then not explain it. Queen Lizandra regained her composure and turned toward Captain Nixon, who had been standing quietly near the doors. Captain, you will escort Commander Michael and Princess Lizandra to the old execution archive. Officially, he remains in your custody. Unofficially, you will help them find out what happened to that cook. Captain Nixon bowed his head. Yes, Your Majesty. Queen Lizandra looked at her daughter, and the warning in her eyes softened into a mother's worry. Lizandra, stay close to Michael and Captain Nixon. If the council erased one truth, they may erase anyone who looks for it. Lizandra nodded, her amusement fading. I understand. Michael gave the queen a small, reassuring smile. No trouble, no heroics, just one pretend prisoner, one princess, and one very serious captain walking into a government archive. Captain Nixon did not smile. That sounds exactly like trouble. The old execution archive sat beneath the palace, far below the bright halls and royal gardens. Its corridors were narrow, cold, and silent. Dust clung to the walls, and every step echoed like a warning. Captain Nixon placed his palm against the archive door. A blue light scanned his hand, then turned red. Denied? Lizandra asked. Nixon frowned and tried again, this time entering a royal security override. Nothing worked. The archive door remained sealed, its red light glowing stubbornly over the control panel. Captain Nixon stepped back, frustration tightening his jaw. That should have opened it. Before Lizandra could answer, the sealed archive door suddenly unlocked from the inside. With a heavy groan, it slid open. Michael was standing on the other side, brushing dust from his sleeves as if this were completely normal. Lizandra stared at him. How the heck did you get in there? Michael pointed casually over his shoulder. Emergency service door, maintenance route, different codes, for fire, escape, angry queens, that sort of thing. Princess Lizandra narrowed her eyes. How did you get the emergency codes? Lizandra opened her mouth, then paused. You know what? Never mind. Lizandra looked from Michael to Nixon, then back at Michael. I am starting to understand why Mother calls you a menace. Michael gave her a small grin and stepped aside. Archives are open. Try not to look impressed. Michael looked around the room. Cheerful place. Really says innocent paperwork never dies here. Lizandra stepped to the central terminal. Search execution records from the year of the attack. Servant class, royal kitchen, charges of espionage. The terminal hummed. No records were found. Captain Nixon's jaw tightened. That should not be possible. Execution files are permanent royal records. Michael leaned closer to the screen. Unless someone, very powerful, made them disappear. Lizandra searched again. Her fingers moved faster. There has to be something. A servant list, a family note, a transfer order. Anything. The terminal flickered, then failed again. At the bottom corner of the dead display, one corrupted phrase remained. Transfer order. Captain Nixon stared at it for a long time. Wait, Nixon said quietly. When I first began service, I was assigned to the outer guard hall under the old captain of the guard. One night, I heard him talking with someone in the east corridor. They were arguing about a special job. Lizandra turned toward him. What kind of job? Nixon lowered his voice. It was about moving a child off-world. I did not know who the child was. I was new, and I knew not to ask questions, but I remember the old captain saying the child could not stay near the palace. Michael looked sharply at him. Did he say where? Nixon closed his eyes, trying to remember. A distant planet beyond the main patrol lanes. Aurelia outpost on the outer limits. Behind them, the archive light suddenly flickered. Captain Nixon turned sharply toward the door. Someone just accessed the security system, Lizandra said, and there is the trouble. The shadow of a drone skittered across the far wall of the corridor. Alarms did not sound, but the sudden silence of the ventilation system was loud enough. Someone had locked the vault from the main grid. They are trying to lock us in, Captain Nixon said, drawing his sidearm with a smooth, practiced motion. We need to move, now. Michael didn't panic. He reached out, grabbed Princess Lizandra by the shoulder, and pulled her back toward the dark maintenance tunnel he had used to break in. If they're locking this place down, they aren't coming to ask questions. What about the coordinates to Aurelia Outpost? Lizandra asked. We don't need the coordinates, Michael said. He pushed Lizandra toward the maintenance tunnel. Nixon has the name. That is enough. Move. Captain Nixon went first, weapon raised. Lizandra followed close behind him. Michael was the last one out. At the threshold of the door, he turned back, pulled a small EMP charge from his boot, and threw it into the archive room. Lizandra looked back at him. Where did you get an EMP charge? Then paused. You know what? Never mind. A loud pop echoed through the vault. The terminal exploded into sparks, and the glowing blue databanks went dark behind them. Nixon, lead the way, Michael said. His voice lost its joking tone. We need to get to the Queen before whoever is behind this knows we just found a real lead. The three of them ran into the dark service tunnel as the archive door slammed shut behind them. In the black silence, Lizandra heard the palace above them, moving like a sleeping beast waking up. Somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching. Michael kept moving, one hand on the wall to guide them through the dust and pipes. His voice was quiet now. No more jokes. We get to Queen Lizandra. Then we find that child. Lizandra looked back one last time. Behind them, the last blue light of the archive died. The private chamber of Queen Lizandra was bathed in soft artificial light. Queen Lizandra sat at her desk, her silver eyes scanning a secure report, while Lady Bella stood nearby with a calm, unreadable face. When the door opened, Michael, Princess Lizandra, and Captain Nixon stepped inside, still tense from their narrow escape below the palace. Queen Lizandra looked up, a sharp relief breaking through her regal composure. She smiled warmly. Come in. Close the door behind you. You can speak freely in front of Lady Bella. Captain Nixon stepped forward, his jaw tight as he gave his report. Your Majesty, the execution files were erased from the Royal Archive. Someone worked hard to erase the cook's existence. But I remembered hearing the old captain of the guard talk about moving a child to the outer limits. Aurelia Outpost, Lizandra added, stepping up beside her mother. We have the location, Mother. We don't have the child's name. Lady Bella looked at Michael, then smiled softly. Mira, she said. Her name is Mira. The room fell into a stunned silence. Michael lowered his hand from his chin, his eyes narrowing. You knew, the whole time. When I found out about the cook, I knew his whole family was in danger. Lady Bella replied, her voice touched by old sorrow. My only regret is that I could not save them both, the mother and the child. The old captain and I made sure Mira vanished. If she is still alive, she is on that outpost. Mother, I am going with Michael and Captain Nixon, Princess Lizandra announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. Absolutely not, Michael and Queen Lizandra responded simultaneously, their voices cutting through the room in perfect unison. Queen Lizandra cracked a sharp glare at Michael, and Michael gave her the same look back. Caught in the awkward second of their matching protective instincts, both of them snapped their heads away and looked to opposite sides of the room. Michael stood with his arms crossed, staring firmly at the wall while murmuring under his breath, She's your daughter, sure, but I'm the one who has to keep her safe. On the other side of the desk, Queen Lizandra smoothed down her silver gown, looking away and muttering to herself, She is my daughter. I do what I want. I do not need a human telling me. Princess Lizandra looked back and forth between the two of them, her jaw slightly slack. watching them with pure awe. The sheer, identical stubbornness radiating from both the queen and the human was almost majestic. "Moving on!" Lady Bella interrupted with a sharp clap of her hands, breaking the tension. "Take my personal stealth transport from the private hangar bay. Go to Aurelia Outpost, find Mira, and bring her back before someone makes her disappear." Lady Bella looked at Michael again, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. "And don't worry, Michael. You are completely off limits." Michael paused, his face twisting into genuine confusion. He looked at the three women, completely lost. What is she talking about? Why does everyone in this palace talk in riddles in front of me? The queen broke into a rare, bright laugh. Beside her, Princess Lizandra and Lady Bella giggled, completely ignoring his frustration as they finally ushered him and the captain out toward the lifts. The private lift carried them down beneath the palace, past levels most servants never saw, until it opened into Lady Bella's hidden hangar bay. The stealth transport waited in the center of the bay, its silver hull quiet under the blue docking lights. Captain Nixon moved first, checking the ramp and scanning the empty corners with military caution. Princess Lizandra followed close behind Michael, still wearing her hood low over her face. She looked at the ship, then at him. "You have flown one of these before?" Michael climbed the ramp without slowing down. "I may have borrowed one once." Lizandra stopped. "Borrowed?" "Temporarily liberated," Michael corrected, dropping into the pilot's seat. His hands moved over the controls like he had known the ship for years. "Relax, Princess. Lady Bella's ships are all built the same. Elegant, dramatic, and far too easy to steal." Captain Nixon strapped himself into the co-pilot seat and gave Michael a hard look. "You know the route to Aurelia Outpost?" Michael's joking expression faded just a little. "I know the way. After Liz banished me, I spent time on the outer limits. Aurelia is the kind of place people go when they do not want to be found." Lizandra sat behind him, fastening her harness while watching the hangar doors split open to reveal the stars beyond the palace shields. "Then take us there," she said quietly. Michael powered the engines, and the stealth transport rose from the hangar floor without a sound. The moment the clearance window opened, he guided the ship through the shield gap and into the night sky above Alaris. Within seconds, the palace lights shrank beneath them, and the stars stretched ahead. "Coordinates locked," Michael said, his voice calm now. "Aurelia Outpost. Hold on." The ship slipped into hyperspace, leaving Kiros behind in a silent flash of blue-white light. The ship dropped out of hyperspace near Aurelia Outpost. Outside the cockpit window, the view was dark and rough. Red asteroids circled a dying star, and a lonely moon sat below them in rust-colored light. "Thin air, bad weather, and no friendly patrol," Michael muttered, working the controls. "Perfect haven to hide a child," Lizandra murmured. "Is there an actual town down there, or just ruins?" Lizandra asked. "A little of both, Your Highness," Captain Nixon replied from the co-pilot seat. "It started as a military listening post. Now it is a hub for salvage crews, haulers, and people who paid a lot of money to disappear." Michael landed the ship on a cracked landing pad near the edge of the outpost. The engines whined, then went quiet. "Keep your hoods up and your weapons hidden," Michael said. "Out here, royal marks do not buy respect. They make you a target." They stepped into the cold hangar air. The outpost smelled like fuel, hot metal, and old smoke. They moved through narrow walkways toward the central market, a dim, noisy den called the Civ. The crowd was full of miners, pilots, and traitors. No one stared for long, but conversations dipped as they passed. A few hands drifted toward hidden weapons, and more than one pair of eyes followed the clean lines of their clothes and the trained way they moved. Three clean, disciplined travelers did not blend in here. Lizandra looked around the crowded outpost and lowered her voice. "How are we going to find Mira? This place is huge." Michael kept walking like he already knew the answer. "I know a guy," Lizandra sighed. "Of course you do." Michael slowed down and tilted his head toward the upper walkway. "Look at the balcony. 10 o'clock. Lizandra looked up. Four armed people stood on the rusted balcony above them. They wore mismatched scrap armor and carried heavy rifles. In the middle of them sat an older woman with gray hair, a metal eyepiece, and a large plasma weapon across her lap. The woman called down in a rough voice, Well, well, space must be on fire if Michael is walking through my outpost again. Vera looked down at him. Michael, I thought the council sent you to the ice sectors. Michael smirked. You asked me the same thing after I was banned and ended up here. Vera pointed at him. And you still never gave me a straight answer. Vera smiled without warmth. Come up before my people get nervous and put holes in your fancy jackets. Michael gave Lizandra a quick look. See? I told you I knew a guy. Lizandra stared at Vera, then back at Michael. That is not a guy, Michael shrugged. It is a human expression. Close enough. They walked up the creaking stairs into a quiet, sealed back room, filled with old ship parts and flickering monitors. Vera sat on a crate, her mechanical eye whirring as it focused on Lizandra. You brought the princess, Vera said, her voice turning hard. The council is offering enough money for her to buy a small fleet. Why should I not hand you over? Lizandra stepped forward before Michael could answer. Because you were paid 25 years ago to protect the child you brought here. We know about the cook. We know about the attack. We are here for Mira. Vera went still. Her metal eye stopped moving. After a long moment, she lowered her weapon. Bella told you the name, didn't she? Only Bella and the old captain knew I brought the girl here. Is she still here? Nixon asked. She is still here, Vera said, pointing toward the far window and the lower scrap yards beyond it. She works in the deep salvage bays. Bay 4, she fixes hyperdrives. But do not expect her to welcome palace uniforms. She knows what they did to her father and mother. Suddenly, red emergency lights flashed in the back room. A heavy vibration shook the floor of the outpost. Vera's monitors flickered, displaying the outer landing pads. A massive, black-hulled High Council Hunter corvette had just breached the atmosphere, its landing clamps tearing into the rock. Vera spat, grabbing her rifle. The council has eyes everywhere. Where have you been? Michael snapped his head toward her. Only the archive. Oh, no. The security feed. Leandra's eyes widened. The feed was still active? Michael's face hardened. Active enough for the council to send a cleanup crew. Michael pulled his plasma sidearm, the weapon humming to life. Nixum, secure the back exit. Lizandra took a deep breath. Tell us how to get to the salvage bays. Vera gestured frantically toward a rusted lift shaft at the back of the room. Take the express chute straight to the lower scrap deck. Bay 4, I'll hold the high ground here. Michael didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lizandra by the shoulder, shoving her into the lift alongside Nixum. But instead of joining them, Michael slammed his palm against the external override button on the wall. The heavy iron gate slammed shut between them. Michael, what are you doing? Lizandra yelled, her hand slamming against the grate as the lift began its rapid mechanical descent. Michael gave her a sharp grin through the bars, drawing his weapon as the doors to the main marketplace blew open behind him. The council brought a corvette, Princess. Someone has to get our ship out of that hangar and give you air support. Find Mira. I will meet you at the lower docking seals. The lift dropped into the dark, leaving Lizandra and Nixum to face the salvage bays alone, while the sound of Michael's plasma pistol began echoing from the upper decks. The lift dropped hard through the old shaft, shaking so badly that Lizandra had to grab the metal wall to stay on her feet. Above them, the roar of heavy weapons echoed through the shaft. Captain Nixum stood in front of her, with his weapon raised. Bay 4 should be ahead. Stay behind me, Princess. Lizandra did not argue. For once she only nodded. Find Mira, get out, reach the ship. Simple plan. The lift slammed to a stop. The gate screeched open, revealing a wide salvage bay filled with broken engines, hanging cables, and mountains of dead machinery. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the outpost shook again. At the far end of the bay, a young woman stood under the open belly of a damaged freighter. Her hands were covered in grease, and a welding torch glowed bright blue in her grip. She turned when she saw them. Bay is closed, she said sharply. If Vera sent you, tell her I am not fixing another stolen fuel coil today. Lizandra stepped forward slowly. Are you Mira? The woman's face changed at once. Her hand tightened around the torch. Who are you? My name is Princess Lizandra, she said. I know that name may not make you trust me, but we came to get you out before the council reaches you. Mira gave a bitter laugh. The palace finally remembers I exist, and it sends a princess? Nixon lowered his weapon slightly, but his eyes stayed on the exits. We do not have time. The High Council has troops above us. Vera said you know what happened to your parents. Mira's anger faltered, but only for a breath. I don't remember much. I remember my father being taken away. I remember my mother trying to run with me. Then she was gone too. Lady Bella arranged for my safety. That is all I was told. I was moved from ship to ship until I ended up here. A blast shook the salvage bay. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere above them, Michael shouted something they could not understand, followed by another burst of plasma fire. Lizandra looked up. That means we are out of time. Mira grabbed a small tool bag from the workbench and slung it over her shoulder. Fine, but I am not going back to Kiros. No, Lizandra said. We are going somewhere safer. Somewhere where the Tharax are hidden. Mira did not answer. She stared at Lizandra in silence, her grip tightening around the strap of her tool bag. Nixon glanced toward the shaking ceiling. Alive, hidden, and waiting. Michael called it Planet X because he refused to tell anyone the real name. Another explosion tore through the bay doors. Council-hired mercenaries began cutting through the outer lock. Mira lifted her welding torch. Back exit, maintenance rails. If your pilot is crazy enough, he will know where to meet us. Lizandra gave a tired smile. Oh, he is worse. Mira led them through a narrow service door behind the scrap pile. Nixon and Lizandra followed closely just as the mercenaries broke into the bay behind them. Above them, through the broken metal roof, Bella's stealth transport roared past the outpost tower, with Michael at the controls. The maintenance rails were a chaotic labyrinth of rusted iron and high-voltage guide tracks. We need to jump, Mira yelled, her voice cutting through the roar of a thermal blast that destroyed the service door behind them. Without hesitation, Captain Nixon grabbed Lizandra by the arm, and the three of them threw themselves into the cargo trough of an automated scrap loader. The heavy iron container jolted forward, hurtling down the steep incline just as a squad of mercenaries reached the rail ledge above. Above the open crater, Michael maneuvered the stealth ship. Bella's stealth ship was an aerodynamic whisper against the heavy atmosphere of Aurelia. Michael had the sublight thrusters pushed to their limit. Behind him, 3 Council interception drones locked their targeting systems onto his tail. Come on, you mechanical gnats, Michael muttered. Let's see if you can handle a real pilot. He ripped the flight stick hard to the left, executing a violent drift that dragged the transport's underbelly along the lip of a ravine. The trailing drones couldn't compensate for the sudden turbulence. 2 of them collided with the rock face, bursting into brilliant orange balls of scrap metal. The 3rd drone remained stuck to his wing. Michael flicked a toggle on the overhead console, overriding the safety protocols on Lady Bella's ship. Sorry about the paint job. He forced the ship into an impossible mid-air spin and fired the twin nose cannons, vaporizing the drone instantly. Lizandra! Nixum! Michael shouted into the comms, his voice fighting the heavy atmospheric static. I'm skimming the lower docking seal of the scrap decks. Tell me you're there. We're arriving now. Leandra's voice crackled back, breathless and laced with adrenaline. And we brought company. Open the cargo ramp. The scrap loader slammed into the terminal bumper at the bottom of the line, throwing the occupants onto the grated floor of the lower docking deck. Directly ahead of them, the vacuum seals were groaning under the pressure of the closing atmosphere gates. The ship! Mira pointed toward the massive observation window. The sleek silver hull of the stealth transport burst through the rust-colored clouds and dropped hard toward the lower docking deck. Michael fired the reverse thrusters at the last possible second, forcing the ship into a brutal sideways skid across the platform. The cargo ramp slammed open as the landing strut screamed against the metal, stopping only a few feet from Lizandra, Mira, and Nixum. Princess first, Nixum commanded, firing his plasma sidearm down the corridor to keep a fresh wave of advancing mercenaries behind a barricade of crates. Mira didn't hesitate. She sprinted up the open ramp, her tool bag bouncing against her side. Lizandra followed right behind her, with Nixum covering them from the rear. Nixum was the last. He turned and tossed a concussive grenade down the entry hall to buy them a few seconds of cover. Lizandra looked at him. Where did you get the grenade? She paused, then shook her head. Never mind. Then she yelled through the internal comms. We're in! Go! 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 In the cockpit, Michael didn't answer with words. He slammed the ramp control, waited only long enough for the cargo ramp to seal, then pushed the throttle completely forward. The stealth transport screamed out of Aurelia's gravity well, the hyperdrive cores humming as it jumped straight into hyperspace, leaving the Council corvette far behind in the dust. Once the ship was safe in hyperspace, Michael finally sat back in the pilot's chair and let out a sharp breath. Mira sat on an equipment crate, using a grease-stained rag to clean her hands. So, Planet X. You are telling me the Tharax who vanished are alive on a hidden world? Lizandra nodded. Mira let out a cold, sharp breath. We are going to find the truth, Lizandra said firmly, her voice carrying the exact weight of her mother's steel. But first, we need the people the Council tried to erase. We need the Tharax, and we need you. The cockpit door slid open, and Michael walked in, wiping a streak of sweat from his forehead. His jacket was torn, but his crooked grin was fully back in place. Everyone intact? Nobody leaking plasma? We are functional, Commander, Nixon said, though he was already nursing a bruised shoulder. Mira looked up at Michael, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the rogue pilot. You're one crazy pilot? Crazy is a dangerous word, Michael said, leaning against the bulkhead. I prefer tactically unpredictable. Besides, the Queen said I am off limits, so technically I have permission to be a little crazy. Mira looked at Lizandra and raised an eyebrow. Does he know why he is off limits? Lizandra shook her head. He has no clue. Captain Nixon muttered under his breath. That explains far too much. Michael looked between them. What? Lizandra and Mira answered at the same time. Nothing. Nixon glanced toward the cockpit display. We still have a Council corvette somewhere behind us, and a hidden Tharax world ahead of us. Details, Captain. Pure details, Michael said, forcing his crooked grin back into place. He turned to the main console and checked the countdown display. We lost them for now, but we keep moving. Get some rest. We drop out of hyperspace at Planet X in 6 hours. 6 hours later, the ship dropped out of hyperspace and decloaked. No alarm sounded. No Council ships appeared behind them. For one quiet second, the cockpit was still. Then the planet came into view. Planet X was not dead or empty. It was blue-green, wrapped in the silver clouds with wide oceans and bright forests shining beneath the atmosphere. It looked too peaceful for a world built out of fear. Michael stood at the cockpit window, both hands resting on the console. His voice was softer than usual. Planet X, he said, home of the Tharax survivors. Mira stepped beside him, her face pale as she stared at the world below. She said nothing, but her grip tightened around the strap of her tool bag. Lizandra did not speak. She only looked at the planet, feeling the weight of her family's history and the lies the Council. Captain Nixon checked the sensors. No beacon, no public signal, no open trade lanes. Michael nodded. That means they are still hiding. A sharp sound cracked through the cockpit speakers. A calm, guarded voice followed. Unidentified vessel, you have entered protected Tharax space. State your name, your origin, and open a visual channel. Everyone in the cockpit went still. Michael slowly reached for the comm. For once, he did not smile. This is Commander Michael of Earth. We are requesting an audience with Commander Jaren. The cockpit screen flickered to life. For the first time, the hidden Tharax could see all four of them. Commander Jaran's voice turned colder the moment Lizandra appeared on the screen. You brought a daughter of Kiros to our world, he said, low and sharp with undisguised hostility. The blood of our kin still stains the hands of the royal house. Explain why we should not vaporize your vessel. Princess Lizandra stepped forward, pushing her hood completely off her shoulders. She faced the screen with her chin held high, letting the silver of her eyes catch the light. Because the royal house was blinded by the same enemy that framed you. We came because of the partial data your people recovered from the box. Lizandra held Jaran's stare through the screen. Commander Jaran, we request permission to land so we can discuss the data your people sent. We are not here to fight. For a long moment, Jaran did not answer. The silence in the cockpit tightened as his eyes moved from Lizandra to Michael, then to Mira and Nixon. Michael leaned closer to the comm, his voice low but firm. Jaran, you know why we are here. That is why your people gave me the data. Let us land and let's talk. Duran remained silent for another tense breath. Then he looked to someone off-screen and gave a short nod. Transmit the coordinates. Sector 7. You will land where we tell you, and you will keep your weapons visible. The screen shifted to a stream of navigational vectors, guiding the stealth transport toward the planet below. Michael studied the path, then eased the ship into descent through the silver cloud layer. The descent was quiet and controlled. Forested valleys opened beneath them, broken by hidden platforms, shielded towers, and narrow rivers that caught the light like polished steel. Lizandra watched the hidden settlement emerge through the mist, realizing how many people had survived in the place Kiros had believed was nothing but emptiness. The stealth transport touched down on a landing platform carved into the side of a sheer cliff. The engines wound down, and the cargo ramp lowered into cold mountain air scented with pine and rain. Commander Duran waited at the far end of the platform with 6 armed Tharax guards. His silver eyes moved first to Lizandra, then to Michael, Nixum, and Mira. Duran stepped forward, his voice colder in person than it had sounded over the comm. We are sorry for the loss of your grandmother and your father, Princess. Your grandmother was loved by our people. Lizandra held his gaze. My mother knows about the cook. She knows about the attack. She wants the traitor exposed, and she wants justice for your people and for Mira. Duran studied her for a long moment, his silver eyes fixed on Lizandra with cold suspicion, but his voice softened for a moment. The box we recovered from the wreckage field, only 2 crystals were intact. For 15 years, our engineers have tried to break the encryption. He glanced toward one of his engineers. Then 10 years ago, one of our engineers began receiving equations on how to decrypt the crystals from an unknown sender. At first, we thought it was a joke, but the equations made sense. As time passed, they became more refined. Duran's jaw tightened. The process was slow. The sender would provide a set of equations. We would build the software and test it. When it failed, we sent the results back. Sometimes the sender took a day, a week, or even a month to send another patch. If that failed too, we kept going back and forth until the next solution arrived. It was a long game. He looked back at Michael. 3 days ago, the latest patch worked. We recovered partial data from the first crystal, and we gave it to you before you returned to Kiros. Duran turned toward the waiting engineer. And this morning, we finally recovered the data from the second crystal. Michael held up one hand. We did not find the name in the palace. The archive files were gone. All we found was proof that someone erased them, and a trail that led us to Mira. One of Duran's engineers stepped forward with the second crystal's data. A massive 3-dimensional hologram bloomed over the landing pad. It displayed the flight trajectory of the former Queen's flagship, colored in bright amber. Then the newly extracted fragment snapped into the center of the display. A sequence of royal clearance codes glowed in sharp blue, carrying a hidden personal signature. Captain Nixum gasped, taking a half-step back. Those are not standard military clearance blocks. Look at the encryption matrix. Lizandra leaned closer to the floating light, her breath catching in her throat. Her hands began to tremble as the terminal finally translated the ancient security signature. It was a private code, one she had seen printed on official correspondence her entire life. It can't be, Lizandra whispered. Whose signature is that? Michael asked. It belongs to a single personal data slate, Lizandra said, her voice cracking as she turned to Nixum. The name is tied to the High Council. Lord Thalora, Nixum growled, his knuckles turning white around his weapon. Mira's face went pale. Duran watched the hologram cycle through the final seconds of the flagship's destruction. The data proved clearly that the Tharax had never fired on the flagship. They had been blamed for a massacre orchestrated by the very politicians who ran the Kiros government. For a moment, Duran did not move. The cold anger on his face cracked, replaced by something raw and almost disbelieving. After all these years in exile, their suffering finally had a name. Lord Thalora, Commander Jaron repeated, the name tasting like poison on his tongue. The man who stood before the council and wept for the fallen flagship. He is the mastermind behind all this. Captain Nixum stepped closer to the console, his eyes scanning the surrounding logistical data linked to the signature. This encryption matrix confirms it. The codes were generated directly from Lord Thalora's personal office inside the High Council. He bypassed the entire security division. He did not just frame the Tharax, Michael said, his voice deadly quiet as he leaned against the terminal. He swept away anyone who could challenge his rise to power. He helped kill your grandmother and father, Lizandra. He silenced Mira's family. And right now he is sitting in the center of Kiros while your mother tries to hold everything together alone. Mira clutched her tool bag tightly against her chest. He wiped out my family for a secret. We have the proof now. We can blast this data across every communication satellite in the sector. No, we can't, Duran intervened, his posture shifting into that of a seasoned military strategist. Lord Thalora controls the primary subspace relays. If we try to broadcast this from the outer rim, his blackouts will intercept it before it ever reaches the citizens. They will call it Tharax propaganda. They will use it as an excuse to launch a final orbital strike against this world. Lizandra looked up, her silver eyes blazing with a sudden, fierce clarity that mirrored her mother's resolve. Then we don't broadcast it from here. We take it to my mother. We drag the truth into the open light of the council floor, where he cannot hide behind his lies. Michael let out a low whistle, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across his face. Princess, I thought we agreed on no heroics. This isn't a heroic act, Michael, Lizandra replied, turning to him with absolute conviction. This is justice. My mother is going to tear him apart. Right now, Lady Bella is her only shield. If the Laura moves against her while we are hiding out here, the crown falls. Duran studied the young princess, the cold suspicion in his eyes completely melting away into profound respect. You truly are your grandmother's blood. The Tharax will not sit in the shadows while the true traitor hides in Kiros. I have 3 cloaked long-range fighters ready for launch. They will escort your ship safely to Kiros, Your Highness. Nixum, prepare the ship systems for immediate takeoff, Michael commanded, snapping back into his element. Mira, copy that decrypted data block into 1 data crystal, or make 2, just in case. The moment we enter Kiros space, the ship needs to look damaged and in distress. Mira lifted one eyebrow. Which part? The crystal or the ship? Michael pointed at her. Both. Captain Nixum's jaw tightened. After what happened in the archive, Thalora will be watching every approach to Kiros. He will close the sky before we reach the palace. Lizandra frowned. Damaged and in distress? Michael grinned. That is how I landed at the palace the first time. I pretended my ship was broken. Lizandra stared at him. Why? Michael opened his mouth. Lizandra raised her hand. Never mind. As the crew scrambled to prepare for the jump back to Kiros, Lizandra stood at the edge of the cliffside platform, looking out over the peaceful valleys of Planet X one last time. The lies of the past 25 years had broken her world apart, but they had also brought together the very people who could fix it. We are going home, Lizandra whispered to herself, tightening the strap of her plasma sidearm. Michael stepped up beside her, his hand resting gently on the hilt of his weapon. The council thinks they cleaned up the trail, Lizandra. They have no idea what's flying their way. Bella's stealth ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Kiros space and decloaked. The ship swayed hard from left to right. Smoke poured from one engine, and warning lights flashed across the cockpit. Michael sat in the pilot's chair with one hand on the controls and the other flipping switches that made the ship look much worse than it was. Mira, he called over his shoulder. Give me more smoke from the left stabilizer. Fake smoke or real smoke? Mira asked from the engineering bay. Michael paused. Fake, if possible. A thick gray cloud burst from the side of the ship. Captain Nixum stared at the warning lights. Commander, half of these alarms are false. Michael grinned. Only half? Mira's good. Princess Lizandra gripped the back of his chair. This is your plan? Pretend we are falling out of the sky again? Not falling, Michael said, limping with style. Behind them, hidden in deep cloak, 3 Tharax fighters followed like shadows. The Kiros defense grid came alive ahead of them. A voice crackled over the comms. Unidentified transport. State your identity and reason for emergency approach. Michael lifted one hand without looking back. Everyone stay quiet. Nobody answers them. Lizandra leaned closer to him. Why? Michael kept his eyes on the defense grid. Because if we answer, They tell us where to land. If we are too broken to keep comms, we can land anywhere. Before Kiros Control could ask another question, Michael slapped the comm switch off. Static swallowed the channel. Lizandra closed her eyes. Why did I ask? Mira's voice came over the internal comm. He told me to make it look damaged. Nixon muttered. He did not say sane. Michael ignored them and kept the ship wobbling toward the palace approach lane. On the surface below, alarms began to sound across Alaris. For the second time in 2 days, a damaged-looking ship was falling toward the royal palace. Michael brought the ship down close to the palace with impossible grace, landing just 50 yards from the main residential wing. The smoke still poured from the left stabilizer, and the alarm still screamed, but the landing was smooth enough to make Lizandra stare at him. You were never in trouble, Lizandra said slowly. Michael popped his harness and stood. I was emotionally in trouble. Captain Nixon hit the ramp control. The rear ramp hissed open before the palace guards could form a proper line. Mira scrambled down behind Nixon, clutching her tool bag and the modified data slate that held the copied evidence. Queen Lizandra appeared with a squad of royal guards at her back. Her silver eyes locked onto Michael first. You humans think space is yours to do whatever you please, she demanded. Michael ran down the ramp and hugged her before anyone could stop him. For one stunned second, the queen froze. Then she smiled and hugged him back. Lizandra cleared her throat loudly. Queen Lizandra and Michael suddenly realized they were still hugging. They pulled away at the same time, both looking in opposite directions as if nothing had happened. Michael murmured through his teeth, I haven't seen you in a while. What did you expect? Queen Lizandra murmured through her teeth. You didn't have to run. I can see you. Mother, Lizandra said, stepping forward. We have it. Queen Lizandra's expression changed at once. Lord Thalora is holding an emergency council session right now. Then that is where we are going, Michael said, wiping a fresh smear of engine grease from his cheek. They crossed the palace corridors at a fast pace. Queen Lizandra in front, Lizandra and Mira close behind her, and Michael and Nixon guarding the rear. Outside the council chamber, a nervous young guard stepped into their path and shouted, Stop right there! Queen Lizandra stopped and narrowed her eyes. Tendrix, is that you? The guard blinked. Oh, hi, your majesty. I am sorry, I did not recognize you. Queen Lizandra sighed. You need to get your eyes checked. Yes, your majesty, I will, Tendrix said quickly. Good, open the door, Queen Lizandra ordered. Tendrix bowed and opened the chamber doors. The council fell silent as Queen Lizandra entered. Lord Thalora stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by several loyal guards and a table covered in documents. Lord Akison rose from his seat, his eyes moving from the Queen to Lizandra, then to Michael. What is the meaning of this? Princess Lizandra stepped into the center of the room. The truth about my grandmother and my father's deaths. Lord Thalora's face hardened. This is not the time for emotional speeches, Princess. Lizandra lifted her chin. No, it is the time for evidence. Mira stepped forward, her eyes blazing. He built power out of murder. He silenced my father. He hunted the Tharax into exile. But we have the real proof. Michael stepped between Queen Lizandra and Princess Lizandra, his plasma pistol humming quietly in his grip. Lord Thalora's gaze drifted from Lizandra to Michael's weapon, a dark, dangerous smile slowly spreading across his face. You bring an armed human fugitive into the sacred council chamber, Princess. You speak of evidence while standing alongside criminals. He gestured broadly to the surrounding council members. The crown has lost control. Detain them. 4 council guards stepped forward, their heavy weapons snapping up. Before they could take another step, Captain Nixon drew his own sidearm with absolute precision, leveling it directly at the lead guard's helmet. Stand down, men. Look at the insignia on your chest plates. You swear your oaths to the Empire of Kiros, not to the personal ambition of the council leader. The guards hesitated, their eyes darting nervously between their commander and Lord Thalora. Do not listen to him, Thalora roared, his composure finally starting to fracture around the edges. They are attempting a destabilization in broad daylight. The real destabilization began 25 years ago, Thalora, Michael said, his voice completely calm as he kept his pistol steady. He looked over his shoulder at Mira. Now would be an excellent time to blow their minds. Mira did not hesitate. She marched straight past the line of guards to the central projection terminal at the heart of the chamber. Two council members rose to block her, but Queen Lizandra stepped into their path, her silver eyes flashing with such lethal, royal authority that both of them instantly took a step back. Mira slammed the data crystal she had prepared into the master interface panel. "This is the recovered data from the former Queen's flagship," she announced, her voice echoing off the high stone arches of the ceiling. These fragments match the flagship's path and destruction in detail. They also reveal the personal data slate signature hidden inside the authorization codes, proving who was responsible for the execution of the attack. With a single heavy keystroke, the chamber's lighting automatically dimmed. A colossal, three-dimensional hologram erupted above the council floor, bathing the entire room in a blinding blue light. The flight trajectory of the former Queen's flagship materialized, first showing its lawful route toward negotiations with the Tharax government. Then the partial data exposed the sabotage. The flagship's shields had been remotely shut down, and its course had been changed to the ambush site by an external command. As the council members watched in stunned silence, the encryption protocols peeled away one by one, revealing the secret palace clearance codes that had lured the ship to its doom. At the very bottom of the data stream, a single finalized security signature locked into place. The system translated the personal coding matrix, flashing the true traitor's name in massive, undeniable letters across every viewer screen in the room. Signature verified, Lord Thalora, High Council Chair. A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the entire council chamber. Lord Akison stumbled back into his seat, his face completely pale as he looked from the screen to the man standing at the center of the floor. "Lord Thalora, it was you." Thalora stared up at his own name, glowing in the dark, the skin around his jaw tightening as the absolute weight of his treason caught up to him. The loyal guards slowly lowered their weapons, stepping entirely away from the council leader. "It's over, Thalora," Lizandra said. "The Tharax are alive. The cook's daughter is alive, and the Empire finally knows the truth." Lord Thalora's face twisted with rage. He reached inside his robe and pulled out a small hidden pistol. He aimed at Queen Lizandra. The council chamber erupted in screams. Michael moved before anyone else could. Lord Thalora fired the weapon. A loud blast echoed through the chamber. Michael threw himself in front of Queen Lizandra. The blast struck him hard in the chest and he collapsed onto the polished stone floor. Blood spread beneath him. "Michael!" Queen Lizandra screamed. "Medics!" She dropped to her knees beside him, pulling him into her arms. "No! No! No!" Her voice broke into frantic crying. "You cannot go. I have not told you to go. I unbanned you. I unbanned you." Captain Nixon and the council guards tackled Thalora to the floor, ripping the weapon from his hand. Princess Lizandra stood frozen, her silver eyes wide with horror as the council chamber fell into chaos. Lizandra finally snapped out of her shock. She knelt on Michael's other side, grabbing his hand and squeezing it tightly. "The medics are coming, Michael. Just stay with us. You survived the palace archive. You survived Aurelia. You are not dying on the council floor." Her voice cracked, and for the first time she sounded like a child instead of a princess. "Mom needs you. I need you." Above them, the doors to the council chamber burst open completely. Commander Duran walked in, flanked by 4 heavily armed Tharax soldiers. He had landed in the palace courtyard a short while ago and had been waiting. Duran looked down at the bleeding human, then at Lord Thalora, who was pinned to the floor. The old hate between Kiros and the Tharax faded inside him. "Get the royal medical transport prepped now," Duran barked to his men, who instantly stepped forward to assist with a portable stasis field generator. As they lifted Michael onto the anti-gravity stretcher, his hand slipped from Leandra's grip. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow, but the blue light of the stasis field stabilized the desperate rhythm of his heart. Queen Lizandra wiped her tears as they mixed with Michael's blood on her trembling hands and tear-streaked face. Surprised, she looked at Duran. "How did you get past the palace defenses?" she asked. Duran glanced toward the open chamber doors where distant alarms still echoed through the palace. "The broken ship," he said simply. For one fragile second, Queen Lizandra stared at him. Then she closed her eyes, drew in a slow breath, and murmured between her teeth, I need to get better planetary defense people. Then she said, never mind. She stood slowly, wiping Michael's blood from her hands onto her gown. The grief on her face hardened instantly back into the unbreakable silver steel of the crown. She turned her gaze to the remaining members of the High Council, who stood alone in stunned, absolute silence. Lord Thalore will be stripped of his titles, his assets, and his citizenship, the Queen announced, her voice echoing with a terrifying authority that shook the very pillars of the room. He will stand trial before a joint tribunal of the Kiros crown and the Tharax survivors. The war that was built on his lies ends today. Lord Akison stepped forward, bowing his head deeply to the Queen, then to Princess Lizandra, and finally to Commander Duran. The council stands with the crown, Your Majesty. Mira and Nixum left with Michael, staying close to him as he was taken to the palace medical bays. Queen Lizandra and Princess Leandra stared at the bloodstain on the council floor. The truth was out. Kiros was finally free from the lies, but Michael was still fighting for his life. The trial began before sunrise. Queen Lizandra did not allow the council to delay, debate, or hide behind procedure. By royal order, Commander Duran took Thalora's place inside the High Council chamber as the voice of the Tharax survivors. Some council members looked uneasy as Duran stood where Thalora had stood only hours before. No one protested. The proof still glowed on the central display, and the blood on the floor had not yet been fully cleaned. Lord Thalora was brought in with his wrists bound. His fine robes had been replaced with plain gray. He looked smaller without his guards around him. Queen Lizandra sat on the royal seat at the head of the tribunal. Princess Leandra stood at her right. Lady Bella stood to her left, silent and watchful. Across from them, Commander Duran stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Captain Nixum presented the recovered data crystal, the erased archive report, and the Tharax extraction file. Mira stood beside him, holding the small tool bag she had refused to set down since Aurelia. Queen Lizandra's voice carried through the chamber like cold steel. Lord Thalora, you are charged with treason against the crown and the empire, conspiracy against the Tharax people, murder, falsifying royal clearance codes, and attempting to assassinate your queen. Thalora lifted his chin. You have no right to judge me with them standing in this chamber. Silence! The Queen yelled, her voice striking the chamber walls like thunder. Lord Thalora flinched, the last remnants of his arrogance cracking under the raw power of her fury. Queen Lizandra leaned forward, her gaze locking onto him with terrifying intensity. You have forfeited the right to speak of who belongs in this chamber. Your actions tore our people apart, built a world out of fear, and bathed this very floor in blood. She paused, her gaze dropping to the dark stain on the polished stone where Michael had fallen. When she looked back up, her expression was entirely devoid of mercy. In addition to your treason against Kiros and your atrocities against the Tharax, the Queen continued, her words deliberate and heavy, you are charged with the attempted murder of a high-ranking officer of the human military. Thalora's jaw tightened, his eyes darting toward the council benches, but he found no allies left. Every single council member looked away, refusing to meet his gaze. Princess Leandra stepped forward, her chin lifted high as she looked down at the fallen politician. Commander Michael came to this world as a prisoner under a false charge. He stayed to help us find the truth. And when you pulled that weapon, he proved who the real protector of Kiros is. Commander Duran fixed Thalora with a cold, unyielding stare, but his eyes were wet with tears he could no longer hide. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of everything his people had endured. My people were blamed for something we did not do, Duran said. We were hunted, scattered, and forced to hide because of your lie. A palace cook tried to warn us about the plot to kill the queen before she could negotiate with the colonies. For that warning, you executed him and his wife. He drew a slow breath before continuing. When we found the damaged data box in the wreckage, we believed it might finally give us the truth. Our engineers fought the encryption for years, but we could not break the encryption. Then an unknown helper began sending us solutions to decrypt the crystals, he said. At first, we thought it was a joke. The first solutions were rough, but they made sense. Little by little, the mind behind them grew sharper. Each patch brought us closer until we finally recovered the data. Jiran turned toward Mira, and deep sadness filled his face. Every eye slowly turned toward her. Mira sat beside Captain Nixon, clutching her old tool bag against her chest as if it were armor. Today, we finally learned who that helper was, Jiran said, his voice breaking. It was the daughter of the man you murdered to keep your lie alive. A tear slipped down Jiran's face as the chamber fell into a silence so deep it seemed to stop time. Queen Lizandra stood up from the royal seat, her silver gown rustling in the absolute stillness of the room. She looked at Jiran, then at Nixon and Mira, and finally at her daughter. The tribunal has reviewed the evidence, the Queen announced, her voice echoing with the finality of law. The signature is yours. The codes are yours. The guilt is yours alone. She took one deliberate step forward, her eyes cold and merciless. If it were up to me alone, I would take you into space and launch you out of an airlock, she said coldly. But we are an empire of law. Thalora, you are sentenced to exile in the human hard labor prison of Nesta. There you will work in chains beneath the weight of your own crimes, day after day, for the rest of your life. Immediately after sentencing, Thalora was transferred to a human military transport bound for Nesta. 3 weeks later, Queen Lizandra walked into Michael's recovery room and found him awake, propped against the pillows and looking far too pleased with himself for someone who had almost died. She sat beside him on the bed and took his hand carefully. "How do you feel?" Michael gave her a tired smile. "Like I got shot." Lizandra narrowed her eyes. "You did get shot. That explains the pain," he muttered. For a moment she only looked at him, relief softening the hard silver of her eyes. Then her expression turned suspiciously calm. "When the healers were trying to save you, the whole medical wing lost power." Michael blinked. "What?" "Apparently," Lizandra continued, "someone threw an EMP grenade in the palace archives a few days earlier, and when the engineers were trying to fix the damage, they accidentally cut power to the medical wing." Michael stared at her. "That sounds bad." "It was," she said. "It took Princess Mira a few minutes to reroute the power." Michael lifted his head. "Princess Mira?" Lysandra ignored the question completely. "The healers think you may have suffered a little brain damage." Michael went still. "Liz, you are joking." The Queen leaned closer, placed both hands gently on either side of his face, and said, "No, no, no, yes." Michael stared at her for a long second. "So Mira is a princess now?" "Yes," Lysandra said simply. "After everything she suffered, I am keeping her." Michael smiled faintly. "That sounds like you." The Queen's smile turned sly. "Do you know what else is funny, Michael? Your government says you left without permission." Michael tried to sit up. "Oh, I can explain, Liz." "I do not want to know," she said at once. "They told me to keep you. They do not want you back. So I'm keeping you." Michael froze, then looked at Lysandra with a troublemaker's smile. The door opened and Princess Leandra entered with Princess Mira beside her. Queen Lysandra stood to leave, walked toward the girls, then leaned in and whispered, "He thinks the brain damage is a joke." Leandra and Mira immediately giggled. Michael looked from one to the other. "Come on, no riddles." Lysandra gave him a playful smile. "I will see you later, Michael." After the Queen left, Leandra moved closer to the bed. "Mira, Nixon and I checked Thalora's office," she said. "We found the names of everyone involved. They were apprehended and judged. Only Akison and Bella were cleared of any wrongdoing. Mother kept them and gave Jiran the third seat." Michael raised an eyebrow. "So what happens to the council now?" "Mother is keeping a 3-person council," Leandra said. Mira stepped forward proudly. "And I am a princess." Michael looked at her, his smile gentle. "You always were." The words softened Mira's face, and for once she did not have a sharp answer ready. Leandra sat beside him and looked at him quietly. "Are you staying?" Michael took a long breath, his eyes moving from Leandra to Mira, then toward the door where Lysandra had disappeared. "Yeah," he said at last. "I finally understand the off-limits and claim thing." For one stunned heartbeat, the room went silent. Then Leandra and Mira burst out laughing, and after a second, Michael joined them too.